Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this event. This event was made possible by the collaboration of the Fresno Regional Workforce Development Board, who will virtually help us host Sierra H Partners, Inc., the Small Business Administration, and the Employment Development Department to help family businesses learn more about the immediate resources that are available during this COVID-19 emergency. I want to thank our dean, Julie Olson Buchanan, who has been an incredible leader during these times for Fresno State. I'd like to introduce Eric Cherkosky at this point, who is the Business Services Manager for the Fresno Regional Workforce Development Sports Business Services Center, which normally connects Fresno County businesses to various resources. The Business Services Center programs includes HR guidance and workshops, job recruitment support, funding for employee upskill training, business development support through the FresnoForBiz.com online referral system, and they also have layoff and business closure assistance via the Rapid Response Program. And as businesses face the possibility of downsizing during this time, we wanted to make sure that everybody knew all the resources that are available to prevent this from happening, or that you have the proper guidance as you move through this difficult decision. So let me yield the floor and welcome Eric at this point. Eric?
Thank you so much, Fernando. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. As Fernando mentioned, I'm Eric Cherkosky. I think he did a great overview of what we do at the Business Services Center. I will say that, historically, everybody kind of recognizes the Fresno Workforce Board as the main entity in the county that provides job training and job connection services to our county residents. But the Business Services Center is kind of a deeper dive in helping employers and businesses get connected to the resources that they need to grow and thrive here in the county. But separate from that also, we also work with businesses who are facing difficult times in a closure or layoff through our rapid response program, which we aim to kind of make this situation less traumatic for both employees and employers, and less costly for businesses as well. We connect them to a lot of great resources that either the Workforce Board provides or our official partners at the state and federal level can provide to businesses as well. And historically, we report business closures every quarter or so to the state, and I would say we usually average about 5, 10, maybe up to 15 at a time of businesses that have either needed rapid response services due to closures or layoffs. And over the last 2 weeks or so, I think we've had well over 50 businesses that we're aware of that have sent out requests to us, impacting nearly over 4,000 employees. So these truly are unprecedented times. And, there are so many new programs and services that are being provided to businesses to help them stay afloat that we're getting information on a daily basis. I mean, some information that we're sharing to businesses last week is rather outdated at this point now, especially now with the CARES Act that was just passed last week. So over the last few weeks, we've been hosting daily orientations for both employees as well as businesses to get them connected and aware of some of these new services and programs that are out there to help them during this time. And we are very fortunate to have several of our partners here today to kind of go provide an overview of what those programs are. First and foremost, we have Sierra HR Partners, the one and only Brenda Butke, the Executive Director. Sierra HR Partners is our official HR representative for the Fresno Workforce Board. Brenda provides a great expertise on a lot of HR issues and guidance. She hosts a monthly HR workshop at our Business Services Center that provides an overview of a variety of different issues for HR professionals. And she hosts our HR hotline, which is a confidential resource that business owners and HR professionals can utilize to get information on different areas of HR compliance. And I can send this information to you via chat. It's 1-844-431-4748. It's open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. It is still in service right now, and we encourage you to go on there if you have any additional questions that you might want to ask in confidentiality. Brenda has a terrific team at Sierra HR that are readily available to answer you those questions. And Brenda's going to be going over some of the new HR implications pertaining to the COVID-19 situation, as well as some tips and information on what to do if you're looking to downsize to help sustain your business during this difficult time. And once we complete with Brenda, we're going to move over to our partners at the Small Business Administration, Victor Brybieska, who is a great partner of ours that we work with probably on a daily basis at this point. When COVID-19 struck, the first resource that was readily available was the Economic Disaster Loan Program through the SBA. And with the passage of the CARES Act, there's some additional provisions that are providing some support for businesses that Victor's going to go over briefly. The Paycheck Protection Program, which is, I believe, going live tomorrow for businesses to take advantage of, as well as a new loan advance that businesses can get up to $10,000 when they're applying for the economic loan program. But I'm going to leave that to Victor to further discuss. And then we're going to end it with a representative from the Employment Development Department to kind of go over programs that businesses can take advantage of during this time, specifically the work sharing program for businesses looking to limit the hours of employees, but still wants to keep them on. This is a great program that they can take advantage of to supplement some of those lost wages that the employees are being impacted by due to downsizing. And I don't know if Fernando mentioned, but as we are going through our presentations, please feel free to submit questions on the chat box here on Zoom. I believe Fernando is going to screen and present those questions to our presenters as they are going on. So don't be shy, feel free to go ahead and do that. And I also want to mention too that we have our rapid response coordinator for the Fresno Workforce Board on call, Martha Espinoza. She does an excellent job providing orientations to employees and businesses on readily available resources and gets them connected to a lot of other programs that we offer as well. And I'm sure she can chime in every now and then to provide some additional information if there's any other questions on that. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over now to Brenda to go over some of the work that Sierra HR Partners does and some tips for businesses to be aware of in this situation. Brenda?
Thank you so much. We want to cover a little bit about the new Family First Coronavirus Response Act so that everyone has at least an overview of the emergency paid sick leave and the expanded FMLA leave. So we'll also talk about downsizing options, and we're fortunate to have speakers from EDD and SBA today, so I won't duplicate that. So if you've got 500 or fewer employees, this applies to you. That includes two components that are intended to help with the COVID-19 response. The emergency paid sick leave and additional expanded FMLA time. It also includes tax credits for employers to help offset the costs of providing additional emergency paid sick time. You all should also know about a posting that's been required, and I'll make sure you have a link to that if you're not aware of it. But this became effective yesterday, and all these leave provisions do end on December 31st. So it applies to all employees, part-time and full-time, but of course it wouldn't include vendors or independent contractors. But if any of you are family-owned healthcare organizations right now, you can exclude healthcare workers from taking this emergency paid sick leave because the federal order wants to encourage essential infrastructure businesses to stay in business. So there is no specific length of service or hours that are required for these emergency benefits. And if you already provide sick leave and leave of absence, this is in addition to what you already provide. So just a quick overview of what we call EPSL, Emergency Paid Sick Leave. This would be the 6 eligibility criteria if an employee is going to be able to take this. The first 3 are due to self-care. The 4, 5, and 6, you can group them together as care for others. So if the employee has been subject to a quarantine or an isolation order related specifically to COVID-19, they're eligible. or if the healthcare has advised them to self-quarantine due to concerns about COVID-19, or if they're experiencing symptoms described with COVID-19, and they've also gone to a doctor to get medical diagnosis, then they would be eligible. 4, 5, and 6 is if they're caring for someone else who's subject to an order of quarantine, and 5 would be if their son or daughter has a school that's been closed, and so they need to be home with them, or their child care provider, who's defined as a paid babysitter. So a family member caring for the kids would not count. So this is a compensated child care provider. And the 6th is kind of a catch-all that the Secretary of Health has added, so that if other provisions need to be added later, that they can add other conditions. So they haven't told us yet what that includes. So the first 3 are paid at 100%, and 4, 5, and 6 would be compensated at 2/3 of the employee's normal rate. So we separated those for you. So just to clarify, there was a lot of discussion originally. Did the quarantine or isolation, even though it's defined differently than shelter in place, they clarified that it was designed to include that. So if you don't have to think about a taped up room being quarantined, it's actually the stay-at-home order as well. So areas that would not be eligible is if they just request to stay home, but there's work for them to do. It also would not cover an employee who was laid off or furloughed. And it does not cover if their schedule was reduced due to lack of work. So instead, they'd be eligible for unemployment insurance. The coverage is a maximum of 80 hours for full-time employees, but it would be reduced based on a part-time employee's average hours worked. And so that would be calculated based on looking at what they have worked for the last 6 months, and then average out those hours by week. So it's a maximum of 80 hours. So as I was saying, there are caps, and the pay is different for the 6 reasons. The first 3, 1, 2, and 3, there is a cap at $511 per day, or an aggregate total of $5,110. And that would be for the first 3 reasons. Reasons 4, 5, and 6, there'd be a cap of $200 a day, and it's paid at 2/3 of the employee's regular rate of pay, an aggregate total of $2,000 for that 10-day period. And again, as we mentioned, there are tax credits available that should compensate the employer for 100% of all the wages they paid under emergency paid sick leave. So currently, traditional FMLA requires a number of employees that you have employed, and they had to work 1,250 hours in a 12-month period. This new expanded FMLA is different. It does not require that there's a certain number of employees, and they only have to be an employee for 30 calendar days. As we mentioned, healthcare workers can be excluded in order to keep healthcare functions going. And an employer that has less than 50 employees can apply for a hardship exemption if you are able to show that this would keep your business from operating. If you allowed this leave or this emergency paid sick leave, we're going to be able to apply through the Secretary of Labor for an exemption. They haven't told us all the details yet how to do that, but here's a snapshot from the Department of Labor. And it says, to elect this small business exemption, you should document why your business with fewer than 50 employees meets the criteria set forth by the department. And you see the last part, which will be addressed in more detail in forthcoming regulations. So more information to come on that. So how are employees eligible for this expanded FMLA? It's if they have a qualifying need related to a public health emergency, which is COVID-19 is included in. And again, if they do have a child whose school has closed, or you don't have care for the children, compensated babysitter, then they would be eligible as well. Our recommendation is make sure that you track and you designate this as extended FMLA so that you can track when that time period is up. So what is that? It's 60 days of leave, which the first 10 are unpaid, although they can fill in that first 10 days with the emergency paid sick leave or other PTO benefits. And then the next 50 days of expanded FMLA would be paid time. So it's not on top of what you already have for FMLA if they have taken some of that FMLA time off. So if they've already used 2 months of their FMLA entitlement, then you would subtract that and they'd have 2 weeks remaining. So again, it's 2/3 their regular rate of pay that they would have worked for FMLA. And again, those tax credits should cover this. So that's a good benefit to help businesses keep moving forward. And just to touch on safety real briefly, that it's our requirement as an employer to provide a safe and healthful workplace. And so Fresno County Department of Public Health has recently instructed us in more detail to screen employees daily, and actually twice daily, to see if they have any symptoms, any cough, any fever. And they should be asking questions such as, do you have a fever, or feel warm, or feel ill? And have you had close contact with someone who's potentially been infected or exposed to COVID-19? Perhaps they've traveled, or have they developed a cough, a sore throat, or other signs? Now, this is in addition to perhaps any normal asthma or allergies. So when they're answering, no, I don't have a cough, it means they're not a worsened condition or cough. So if you need a copy of that questionnaire, we can make sure you have that as well. So Fernando or Eric, is there anything that we can do to help improve the sound? Shall I just keep going?
I can hear you, Brenda.
Okay.
Yeah, there's just a little background noise, but
It usually happens when someone's not muted. I'll keep going if you can hear me okay.
Yeah, it's coming from your microphone, Brenda. I'm not sure what that is.
Okay. I've turned my volume way down, so hopefully that will help. Well, sometimes we do need to take corrective action in the way of downsizing, laying off, just to get through this situation together. And the projections are it may be weeks or even a few months. So we're helping a number of employers look for alternatives to layoffs. We may still need to do them, but perhaps it can be a combined menu of options that allow us to get through this. So I would recommend approach this with a keen sense of business, because we do want to have a business to come back to, but also balance it with a sense of compassion. We want to do this with great compassion and dignity for employees, so that we are, one, having a great reputation and hopefully get those employees back as we improve the situation. But also, just to let you know, juries have awarded large sums to employees who have been terminated if there was behavior from managers that the company tolerated that was harming the dignity of employees.
Brenda,
And yes,
Brenda, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Fernando again. We do have a
yes,
question from the audience that
okay,
kind of belongs to the previous section. And the
yes.
question is paid FMLA required for employers with less than 50 employees?
You can file for that exemption, as I mentioned, but it is including all employers who are under 500 employees. But if it would be a hardship, they're going to give us detailed instructions about how you can file for that exemption.
And how do we qualify for that exemption?
You're describing the circumstances, how it would cause you to either go out of business or not be able to provide your core services to at least a minimal level. They haven't told us yet if there's going to be a form or a link, so we're standing by still for that information. It's interesting because here we are a day into it already, and we don't know how to file for an exemption yet, but they say it should be coming any day.
So the Institute for Family Business will continue to collaborate with all these agencies to make sure we bring that information to you. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Please stop me at any time. I would be happy to answer questions as they come. So I was just sharing that there have been some court decisions even that are helping us remember not to just do this efficiently and heartlessly. I'll give you an example they cited. The United Kingdom is a few weeks ahead of us in going through this COVID-19 pandemic. And it was reported that there was a large firm in the UK that sent a series of text messages to its 2,500 employees on their cell phones, simply telling them to call a number. Then the recorded message they got said, quote, "All staff who are being retained will be contacted today. If you have not been spoken to, you are therefore being made redundant." I don't think anyone wants to be told in a recorded message that you are redundant. So we want to make sure that we are still being mindful that these are people that we're dealing with. But it's clearly not business as usual, that it's expected that our gross domestic product is going to take quite a hit. I believe this 1% estimate is conservative. Even so, it would be about double what we saw in the 2008-2009 financial crisis. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin said that he expected to see unemployment as high as 20%, and it was 24% just for comparison during the Great Depression. However, it is the highest it's been in 40 years. Picture going back to the week of March 21st, when unemployment was 281,000. Then it went up by last week to 3.3 million, and this week it doubled to 6.6 million. So it's gone up from 250,000 to 6.6 million. This is hitting us all and hitting us all very hard. So it's very likely that we're going to have to take some drastic measures just to survive. However, the good news is that recovery is expected to really come back with a booming growth in the third quarter and build still continually through the fourth quarter. So based on what experts have told us, like Goldman Sachs, if we can hang on and make it through the summer, we should see unprecedented growth. But in the meantime, I know there's a lot at stake. And so we're talking to a lot of employers about how do we downsize. And some of you have already started taking this action, obviously by the unemployment figures. But every time we downsize and cut, I liken it to surgery, because as surgery can be life-saving, know that it also requires a recovery period. And that means that there's going to be a morale hit. There will be a loss of clients, and there will be an impact on your business that will probably take a while to ramp back up. So we want to make sure that we're aware how we're making those decisions, that our services are covered at least minimally, and that we have a way to keep in touch with that talent so that we hopefully don't lose them to some competing organization that can pay them a little bit more. So we also want to be in a position to pivot quickly as the market rebuilds, and hopefully, as the predictions are, the third quarter, because it can be very costly to go through that whole rehiring process. So let's keep a core staff if at all possible. We also know that layoffs are really demoralizing to employees. Many times it's people's identity, and that can be devastating. But also, if we have layoffs that are done in perhaps mass quantities or not in a thoughtful way to explain all the other cost-cutting measures that were considered first, it can really result in negative publicity, not only from our employees, but from other businesses in the area as your employees go applying elsewhere. So we want to consider the criteria for a layoff and make sure that we have a solid thought process and defense, especially if there's any claim of discrimination. And sometimes that happens inadvertently. And I'll tell you what I mean in just a moment. So let's look at a menu of options and not just make it only layoffs, if at all possible. So I believe it starts with a great foundation that leaders should have, that we all share the pain. We're in this together. So it's from executive to any positions throughout the organizations. We don't want to send a message that the leader, the owner, the top managers are unfazed by this and still collecting large bonuses. We know how that goes over when we've seen that in the news, right? This will go much better if we do have some solid human resource initiatives in place. And that would include knowing what our staff's KSA stands for: knowledge, skills, and abilities. Do we have some kind of a talent inventory so that we know what else they do? Maybe they're not fully utilizing all their skills in their current job. So can they wear multiple hats? Those are the people that can flex and help keep us going in a time when some of our services and product demand is down. Also, if we know what training they may need, with a little bit of training, they could cross over into another role of our business that may still be doing better. And of course, keeping pace with what competitive wages are and competitive benefits are will help us keep that talent and then regroup them when we start to recover. So this is always just good, solid HR initiatives to have, even more so now. So let's look at some alternatives. Obviously, you've probably thought of some of these already, but perhaps haven't thought of layering them or combining them. We can be reducing hours so that we spread that economic consequence of cost cutting throughout all employees, instead of just targeting a few for layoff. Our coworkers recognize that and appreciate it, knowing that we are trying to keep the team together as much as possible, and we don't take these decisions lightly. Most people would willingly cut some hours in order to allow others to stay employed. There's always exceptions to that, but that's something I'd like to consider across the board. And it doesn't mean that you're cutting hours at the same percentage across the board. That's a decision based on what services are still thriving and which people can wear multiple hats. Always never underestimate the power of voluntary separations. I know of some organizations that have asked, is there anybody who is looking to be home? Perhaps you've been looking to spend more time with your family. And in some cases, nobody comes forward, but in other companies that we've dealt with, they have had some, and it perhaps cut their layoff down by 25%. Just a quick note when we're talking about caution, if you do have any union environments, you want to make sure that you refer to the collective bargaining agreement. The CBA will oftentimes have specified terms for layoffs and furloughs, and perhaps it means you must follow seniority, or there must be a person in the room present when you do it. So I just wanted to remind everyone to check that if you do have a union environment.
Brenda,
Also, yes.
and may I ask another question from Dan? Does an employer still have to garnish for child support payments from the leave wages or PPP for that matter? So
Do they
if
still
you're
have
still paying
garnishments?
employees with leave wages, do you still have to uh, garnish for child support and other mandates?
Yes, it can be negotiated though to reduce it, because they usually will either have a dollar amount or a percentage of the salary. It was driven by a formula. So once this agency is advised, whether it be through the IRS, what agency has presented the order, you just notify them that those wages have changed, they've dropped, and that would be renegotiated. Other questions? Okay, so another alternative is to look at stages or progressive steps in your plan. So instead of looking at a menu, another one of these would be something I saw that the automakers in Japan had done. And they took it in steps. So they said, step one, compensation will be the base wage reduced, and a percentage, in this case it was 50%, would be attached to specific goals, which may include company earnings and specific things the employees can do for attracting new business. So that would be step one, is to lower the base and includes incentives. Here, MBO stands for management by objective. So you could come up with some specific benchmarks and goals to attach part of the wages. Again, keeping in mind that if you switch to commission, that has to be put in writing and signed by the employee. So if that didn't get them where they needed to go, then step two would be to reduce hours. And that might be by 25% or some percentage. And if that didn't get them where they needed to go, now we'll cut the hourly rate or the weekly rate as well. And then the last step they considered was eliminating positions. And they did it in that order to preserve the team and help preserve the morale. Your business may be different, but I just thought I'd introduce this as a staged possibility. So also, EDD is going to be on the line with us, I believe. So I'll just briefly mention work sharing, but this is a way that it can provide sometimes more lucrative benefits for the employee than just regular unemployment, because there's a plan that's developed, and it could allow employees to be off work for as much as 3 weeks, or unemployed by no more than 60% to still receive unemployment. There are a couple of conditions. At least 10% of your workforce has to be affected, and you do need to agree to keep their health benefits intact. So that is something, there's more information at EDD's website if you just type in work sharing. Work furloughs, we're hearing the word furlough a lot lately. And furlough is not clearly defined legally from layoffs. They can be similar. According to the DLSE, Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, that if you are furloughing an employee and you are not giving them a set return to work date within the same pay period, it's considered a separation, and all wages, like vacation accrued, would be due. We're not clear if the DLSE is going to relax its position on that right now because of the pandemic, but that's actually what the DLSE guideline do state right now. So be very careful If you're furloughing and it's an indefinite period of time, I get some legal advice before you use that term. So we mentioned voluntary separations, but normal attrition is another way closely related. And perhaps you can incent them with an extra month's benefits coverage. Same thing with early retirement, perhaps offer to pay their COBRA for a month or two. There are ways to trim benefits, but let me suggest be careful. If there is accrued vacation or PTO in their bank, it's already earned, it's earned wages. So we can make a change in how we accrue moving forward, but we cannot reduce whatever's already in their bank. So again, that's PTO or vacation. Sick leave is not an accrual entitlement unless you specified it that way. One thing to consider, if you're laying someone off, perhaps you have contacts or a source and you know someone else who's hiring. You could pick up the phone and call that contact and recommend this person that you're laying off. Or you might just generally mention to employees as they're leaving that we've heard that temp agencies have a high demand right now. Oftentimes employers have a few hours here and there and they're utilizing temps. So this could be a little softer landing for the employee. They may get some work in some hours if you make sure to mention temp agency referrals. Okay, any questions on any of those options that we're looking at? If not, then let me get right into downsizing through layoffs. And I like the quote by Lael Wolf. She has written for About.com for a number of years and has helped small businesses that are in financial trouble. And I love her quote that she says, downsizing should not be seen as failure, but as a change in business strategies. And that is really true. Right now, if we don't change our business strategy, we won't survive. So we want to carry this through in how we communicate to our employees as well. What is the positive intent? Even though it doesn't feel positive to the employees who are being laid off, the ones left behind should know we're not just in total chaos and we're going to go out of business next week. That this is repositioning for our operational success moving forward. So consider that quote. I really like that one. So let's talk about what to do to plan in advance, what to do in implementing a layoff, and then what to do following a layoff. If you don't have a business plan, this is a good time to create an emergency business plan, worst case scenario. Otherwise, modify your existing business plan and think about where there still is work. I love how some of the businesses are retooling and changing their services. For example, we hear about Snowflake Design, who makes leotards for the Olympics, is switching their operations to make face masks now and is successfully selling those. So can we use talent as we retool some of our services where they're still profitable or where we can change? So look at that and then think about, if we need to lay off, let's do it as much as possible in only 1 or 2 sweeps. Because I'm reminded of the prisoner of war story that in the Vietnam era, some of the returning POWs told us one tactic was that fellow POWs might be taken out of the holding tent in the middle of the night, never to be seen again. And so it got to where the prisoner of war personnel were afraid to go to sleep because they didn't know who would be next. We can liken that to layoffs that are 1 at a time per week. Employees' trust and morale goes down because they wonder who is the next person to be taken out, never to be seen again. So let's try to do this in well thought out batches. It doesn't have to be constant cuts. After you make your plan, where can you switch your services? Who do you need to provide services? Then I would recommend running it by legal to make sure you don't have inadvertent discrimination or what's called disparate impact. What that means is that you might find in the end that you were laying off more women than men, or vice versa, or more older people. So that could even be inadvertent. What I'd recommend is that you get a spreadsheet and you list the employees whose work is significantly down or which departments have closed, list their ethnicity, their age, their gender. Do they have any known health conditions or disabilities that they've disclosed? Did they recently ask for a disability leave? You'll want to list all that so that you can look at it in a holistic approach to see what is the impact. Because even unintentionally, we may have groups of people that are disproportionately impacted. And that could be the basis for a discrimination complaint. You notice I added performance. I recommend that you go back through and look at the last 2 performance evaluations that you've done. If you've got people who are not team players, they've not been dependable, you're constantly having to write them up for tardies or being on their cell phone, not being accurate, especially if it's a work ethic or an integrity issue. This is the time that you can part ways with those problem employees. Also in our planning, I want to just quickly mention the WARN Act. Hopefully you have heard of this. That's the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. There's been an emergency reprieve on the 60-day notice that's been required in the past. By this governor's executive order, we have that emergency reprieve. But let me be clear that it did not alleviate us from the responsibility of actually sending in the notice. So just that 60-day advance requirement. And that was dropped with the intent to minimize the spread of coronavirus. If we had to wait 60 days, it would be defeating the purpose. So if you've got 75 or more employees that have been working in the past 12 months, and that includes both full-time and part-time, then the WARN Act would apply to you. I've also given you a link there that has a frequently asked question page on the WARN Act, specifically with COVID-19 time periods in mind. But if your plant's closing or you're laying off 50 more of your employees within a 30-day period, or you're moving your location more than 100 miles away, we do need to make sure that we send the WARN Act notice.
And Brenda, this is Eric. I did send the link in the group chat as well to access. You can access it through edd.ca.gov on instructions on the WARN. And if you do need any support or help in filing a WARN notice, you can visit our website at www.fresnobsc.com for further instructions on how to file that.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so I'm switching my sound and I still hear the feedback. Well, we keep working at quality, that's our goal. But in planning in advance, may I suggest that any of the upper level managers are involved in the planning process to make sure we've got agreement, buy-in, and they're looking at the business plan, the business impact, how it's going to impact scheduling before we get to the next level supervisors, because we want to have unity with the parents, if you'd like to think of it that way, before we start telling the teenagers and the kids. Because when we get to the supervisors, we want to make sure they know that we're doing this for specific operational positioning and survival, and that their reaction to this in front of the team, in front of the employees, they set the tone. So we don't want them complaining about it, saying, woe is us, we don't know if we're going to survive. They need to be on board with the positive purpose of why we have to do something that's very difficult. for the future survival of the business. We also want their input on what some potential problems could be. The supervisors are closer to the front line than the upper managers. And so they might have some very helpful feedback, problems that we can prevent or plan for. If you have an HR department, obviously you should have exit packets ready with unemployment brochures, information about COBRA, which is how an employee can continue their group coverage as an individual and pay the premiums. I would mention too that we have found out for our plan and for many plans out there that the benefit providers are extending some emergency eligibility coverage. Ours was extended through July 31st. So it'd be good to check with your broker and not automatically cancel your employees if their work hours drop below their normal eligibility. Like if you have it at 30 for eligible workers and you drop them down to 20 or fewer hours, it may be possible their benefits will still be extended in this emergency situation. You can have some information about outplacement services, and Martha Espinosa from the Fresno Regional Workforce Development Board is available to help talk about what services can be provided to help people with interviews, and resumes, and all that. So make sure you take advantage of the resources with the Workforce Board. And then we want to plan our messaging to the staff. And I thought, who better to learn from than professional writers? When Gannett Newspaper Group was implementing a furlough for just a week of unpaid time to help save costs in a difficult time, I learned a lot by looking at their notice. And I've captured some key points that I really like. And that is the share the pain, we're in this together. And what they said was, today, Gannett is implementing a furlough program across all U.S. divisions. This means that most of our U.S. employees, including myself, this is the top publisher, and all other top executives will be furloughed for the equivalent of 1 week in the first quarter. This furlough will be unpaid and unions are asked to participate. That's a great way to say we're in this together. The top executive is coming out saying, including me. That sends a strong message to the employees. And then I liked, we talked about the positive purpose. He said, we are doing this to preserve our operations and continue to deliver for our customers while confronting the issues raised by some of the most difficult economic conditions we have ever experienced. And then making no promises. This is so tempting to want to say we're going to be over this in 2 weeks and be fine. But he said, we sincerely hope this minimizes the need for any layoffs going forward. So I think that's a great example. And then do show some compassion. This is not your fault. You're not apologizing for the economy. But I like what he said, that we've made some very difficult decisions, all with the goal of keeping the company strong and preparing for the future. And here it is. I understand I have asked a great deal of you, and I regret adding to your burden with this program. And then thanking employees. My sincere hope is this renews the need to do anything more. As always, I thank you for your patience and loyalty to the company. So I hope those components help you in your messaging. Get that ready in advance, because when you implement it, you're going to want to complete those announcements all in one day, if at all possible. Because otherwise people are hearing it through the grapevine, the message gets changed, and people feel left out. So I understand one meeting is not always possible, even though it's ideal, because they see each other, look around the room, and know we're all hearing this. But I know you've got different locations, perhaps different shifts. If you need multiple meetings, have if possible, the same top leader announce this at all sessions. If not, then at least use scripts so that there's a consistent message out there. And then it's ideal in the meeting time, even though it may be scary, is to allow them to ask some questions right there in the meeting in the open forum. Because otherwise, guess what they're doing? They're going out into the hallway and out into the community to share their frustration and their sorrow and make up their own answers potentially. So if at all possible, in addition to the group, people who are impacted with their hours being cut, perhaps the supervisor could meet with each one of them individually. And certainly if they're being laid off, let's not let this happen via a text message or a recorded message on the phone. So we can thank them for their service and perhaps say, I wouldn't hesitate to recommend you if you're applying for a temp agency or another job in the meantime. I'll be happy to write a letter of reference for you, but only if you have been pleased with their performance. So following layoffs, what do you do after it's over? Some companies have told us that they have made computers available that have been created like a dummy computer so they're not able to get to client lists or destroy any information if they're upset, but just something that allows them to file for unemployment before they leave. So they did something in action to help get them a step further before they left. Also connect with the rapid response team, the Fresno Regional Workforce Development Board for some of those preparation tools. Have them update their resume and again, feel like they're in forward motion to get some guidance for success when they interview. And this is not the time for managers to go hide out in their office, even though everyone has been impacted and might not be the most cheery and we're social distancing, but keeping the appropriate distance, be out there so that you can have a pulse, answer questions, and not let them feel like they were abandoned. Good idea to post a memo that recaps the same information that you made in that group announcement meeting. So remember to focus on the mission, what we're doing, the positive purpose in moving forward, that we're all in this together. Remember not to make any promises. Do have some compassion and thank employees. So that same message could be posted on bulletin boards, your intranet, places when employees start to recover from the emotional shock, they have a source to go back to for a recap. Then after you want to know what's going on. We made our best plan in advance, but we couldn't plan on everything. So let's get feedback from the employees by holding a post meeting, maybe 1 to 2 weeks after the layoff, to help solve any problems that we didn't plan on. If there's customer service gaps that we didn't see, so that we can make sure production and service continue as well as possible. There's also a sense of loss and maybe guilt for some of the employees who are left behind. So we want to give some supervisors some coaching tools for how to listen to employees' concerns and how to hold small group meetings to troubleshoot concerns, how to stop it if it's unproductive and they're grandstanding. So help them through that. They're going to need to have some information share time. And if at all possible, think about what things can you keep as normal as possible. So if you used to meet every week, maybe at least you could meet every other week. If you used to celebrate birthdays, let's try to keep doing that to keep some sense of normalcy and humanity in our organization afterwards. It will probably be a while before we have a potluck though. There may be other things we can do. But we're going to need to work to recreate trust and buy-in and loyalty. So let's pay attention to thanking people for what they're doing to pick up. They may be covering 2 jobs right now, working long hours, perhaps with less pay. So even if it's a thank you coupon, a Starbucks $5 gift card if you can afford that, or a note of thanks that's personally signed by you, just to say I recognize what you're doing and I appreciate it. So I mentioned I was going to give you that tax incentive link, and that's here at the top. It's a DOL newsroom release to give you more information about how to recoup the taxes. And it actually comes from payroll taxes. Instead of having your payroll taxes go to the IRS for those employees who are receiving paid leave or emergency paid sick leave, you're holding those taxes back and retaining them. That's how you recoup that money. So you'll need to work with your payroll company to have a line item for that. And then there's the link for the poster that you need. So I want to see if there's any questions before we turn it over to Victor with the Small Business Association.
Then we're going to turn over now to Victor Bribieska from the Small Business Administration. Victor?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Victor Bribieska with the Small Business Administration. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Fernando. We'll get started with the most recent information that we have with the Small Business Economic Injury Disaster Loan, as well as the PPP, which is changed a little bit, not a lot. So we'll get right in it. The disaster declaration, everybody knows, has been in effect. It covers all of the U.S., including the U.S. territories of Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. So any business, any small business can qualify for these disaster loans. As far as the basics of the loan, right now, the credit history, the repayment, and the eligibility has been relaxed. So as far as the credit history, those individuals that were recently declined for a traditional economic injury disaster loan prior to the approval of the CARES Act were requested to reapply for the new EIDL program, which has a lot more relaxed credit requirements than the previous version of it. Same thing with the repayment and the eligibility. As far as the term loans and how much you can borrow, right now the loans are going up for up to $2 million. The interest rate for this disaster on economic injury is 3.75% for small businesses and 2.75% for nonprofit organizations, with terms up to 30 years. And right now it's between 15 and 30, depending on the size of the loan. These loans are eligible for use of fixed debts, payroll, accounts payable, and other bills that could have been paid had the disaster not occurred. The loans are not intended to replace lost sales or profits or for expansion. And so if you're going to do the application, when the loan officer calls you, they're going to ask you what the use of it is going to be, why, what amount you're looking for. The SBA is the one that's going to give you and offer you the loan amount itself. So can you negotiate? Yes, it might be that you need more or you need less from the amount that the SBA will go ahead and offer you. As far as collateral, the economic disaster injury loans do not require collateral if it's $25,000 or less. If it's $25,000 or more, we will take the collateral if it's available. SBA will not decline the loan for lack of collateral, but will require that the borrowers pledge what is available. As far as applications, this is the most recent link for the application itself. It has changed a few times since the disaster was declared. This is the most recent one. It has been updated, and as far as sending documents in or uploading documents, all of that has been changed completely. So this is the newest link and the newest version of the portal. It's very easy to do. Right now, from the folks that I've talked to that have used the portal, it's taken them about 20 to 30 minutes max to get through the portal and get your application in. The economic disaster injury loans are directly with the SBA. That's what that link says there, sba.gov. It's not with the bank. We'll cover PPP here in a bit because it changes a little bit as far as the application is concerned. There are no fees to apply. There is no obligation to take the loan if offered. Again, the maximum loan amount of unsecured loan is going to be $25,000. There are other disaster declarations in our area, and so if you have an existing disaster loan and then you apply for this declaration, you will not be able to combine them into one. Each declaration has its own. Each declaration has its own amount. Each declaration has its own debt. Therefore, they cannot be together. But you can apply to have multiple disaster loans with each disaster declaration that has been issued. Ineligible entities at the moment are agricultural enterprises, and that the definition under Section 18B1 is those organizations that are farms, the ones that actually do the planting, the harvesting, the pruning, and all those things that have to do directly with orchard operations will not qualify for these type of loans. Religious organizations, and you'll see an asterisk next to that, as well as charitable organizations, do not qualify for the EIDL loan, and I'll cover the asterisks here in a bit. Gambling concerns, casinos, and racetracks. Again, how do you apply? You go through that link, you complete the application online. If you have any questions or you have any challenges in completing the application, you can give us a call, or you can call the SBA Customer Service Center at that 1-800 number. If you're looking for a status on your application, you shoot us an email at disastercustomerservice@sba.gov, and we can get back to you with the status of your application and where you're at on that. Should you need assistance on completing the application, or you need assistance with financial documents, you can always get this assistance for free with any of our resource partners, Small Business Development Center, SCORE, Women's Business Centers, Veteran Business Outreach Centers. Local chambers of commerce are jumping on, but different departments within Fresno State are helping us out as well. So all you have to do is click on that link, and it'll give you a listing of all the service provider and resource providers that we have right now, and be able to assist you in completing and getting together that documentation that you're going to need. With regards to timing, right now, the best thing is do the application as soon as possible. The biggest reason for delays in processing is due to missing information or documentation. So please make sure to complete every line item on the application and submit all required documents at the same time. If more funds are needed, you can request a modification to your loan and request more amount. At the same time, if it's too much of what we're offering you, you can request a lower amount in which we will modify that loan. The good news is you can always come back and request more. So keep that in mind when you get that call from the loan officer. If for whatever reason the loan request is declined, you will be given up to 6 months to provide new information and submit a written request for reconsideration. Now, this is before the CARES Act, okay? This is all before the CARES Act, and the reason I gave this information is because it's an enhancement, or the CARES Act enhances what's currently there, and this is how it works. So we talked about the low-interest long-term economic injury disaster loans for up to $2 million. The first payment is deferred for 12 months or 1 year from the day that it was dispersed, and that's where you go to do the application. Under the CARES Act, the EIDL loan advance will qualify the business for up to $10,000 in loan forgiveness. Example is if your loan application is approved for, let's say, $25,000, $10,000 of those will be forgiven. The remaining 15 will be treated as a loan, as previously mentioned in this presentation. So that's the enhancement from the CARES Act to the existing EIDL loan program. The good news is that you do the application once, and it'll qualify you for both of these programs. The Payroll Protection Program, this is the newest one that was also part of the CARES Act, and it goes into effect tomorrow. It goes into effect tomorrow. Loan amounts will be forgiven as long as the loan proceeds are used to cover payroll costs and most mortgage interest, rent, utility costs over the 8-week period after the loan is made. And employee compensation levels are maintained. So there is a requirement in order for this loan to be considered forgivable and not continue to be a loan as it's stated. The funds are provided in form of loans, as I mentioned, that will be fully forgiven if used for payroll cost. And due to the subscription, we will require that at least 75% of the amount must be used on payroll. So it gives you that other option to continue to have your employees working.
Victor,
yeah.
Quick question, like as you plan to do this, if you plan to take this route and not lay off your employees because you will be getting this loan, how long would it take for the SBA to notify the applicants that their loan has been approved? That's one of the questions. And can you apply for $10,000 and not have to repay it?
To the last question, you can apply for the $10,000. However, we will offer you a large, maybe a larger amount or maybe a less amount based on your application. Do you have to take the loan, the full loan amount? No, the answer is no. Can you receive the $10,000 up front? Yes, that's what's called an advance. We will advance you that $10,000, and then you can request that additional loan amount to come later. With regards to the first few questions, we will be covering those here in the next few slides.
Thank you.
So the businesses, all small businesses with 500 or fewer employees qualify for this, including nonprofit organizations, veterans organizations, tribal concerns, self-employed individuals, sole proprietorships, independent contractors are eligible for this. As I mentioned in previous slides, there was an asterisk on religious organizations and charitable organizations, which now under the CARES Act will allow these organizations to apply for both the EIDL as well as the payroll protection program. The only thing is that they do have to apply. When can you apply? Starting tomorrow, small businesses, sole proprietors can apply and receive loans to cover the payroll. Starting April 10th, independent contractors and self-employed individuals can apply to receive the loans through the Paycheck Protection Program. How does this work? The application itself and all required documents will be given to an SBA-approved lender. The SBA will not be processing these directly between SBA and borrowers. We are using our 7A lenders, which are approved lenders through the SBA, to process these loans. And so once you take that information to the approved lender, they will process it and they will give you a status date and what the turnaround time is. Again, going back to the original comment in the previous slide, the reason why loans get delayed or take a lot longer to process is due to missing information, required information that wasn't provided, or missing information on the application. Again, you can apply through SBA existing network, and I will put in the link that was just released this afternoon on how to search for SBA lenders that are using or that will be processing the PPP in your chat here in a bit. As soon as I finish with the presentation, I will post it there on the chat so you can click on it, type in your zip code, and it'll tell you or give you a whole list of those lenders that will be taking the PPP application and will be processing it for you. What do you need to apply? You will be asked to submit the application, required documentation. The required documentation will include payroll records. So I would recommend to take your payroll records for 2019, January 1st through December 31st, all 4 quarters, including the first quarter of 2020 with you, as well as the profit and loss statement and the application of the PPP to the lender, and they may ask for additional documentation, so be prepared for that as well. But they will be the ones to give you more information and request or require more documentation. What can you use the loans for? Again, interest on mortgage obligation, rent and lease agreements, enforce utilities before February 15 of 2020.
Victor, are you allowed to include owner's compensation in your loan amount in addition to payroll?
Yes, because you're considering yourself an employee of. Sole proprietors, independent contractors, for example, do get paid in that way, where there's not a check given to themselves, right? Uber drivers are independent contractors, where they get paid directly from the individual in whom they are driving around. Therefore, that is considered as compensation to that particular owner, if you will.
Thank you.
And it's for a sole proprietor, independent contractor, wages, commissions, income, or net earnings from self-employment capped at $100,000 on an annualized basis for each employee. So you have the costs here as to where you can get that and how it's based and how it's assessed as far as compensation itself. And all of this information is online on this link that you see here. Payroll Protection Program, SBA.gov, funding programs, loans, Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. You see on that link. All of this information, plus more information with more detailed questions available at that link. Again, if you want to apply for the EIDL program, including the advanced, you go to that website there. And if you need more information on other resources and other assistance or anything related to SBA, go to our website, sba.gov, and you can get that information there. Questions? Okay,
Well,
so I'll go ahead and, yes.
Yes, I wanna just make sure that everybody knows that I will be providing these slides to everyone that signed up and everybody that is in the room today. The Institute for Family Business normally provides webinars or seminars like this, and we will go ahead and publish this on our YouTube channel and on our website as well. But I'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of these presentation files as has been requested on the chat line.
And Fernando, we will also have these up-to-date slides on our www.fresnobsc.com website as well. We currently have some of our slides, including Brenda's presentation and our general rapid response orientation slide on there as well right now, but we will be including the new SBA information on there by tomorrow.
Great. Now I have a series of questions that are coming from the chat line that are coming directly to me. So I'll ask the first one from Jack. What if we only rehire 2/3 of our employees? Does the remainder that is not forgiven go into a loan process?
Yes, as you remember on the presentation slides here, both the EIDL as well as the PPP are going to be considered loans. In order for the PPP to be considered forgivable, at least 75% of the funds must be used for your employees to keep them on board or to rehire employees.
I see. So you must meet that 75%. Otherwise, the entire loan becomes non-forgivable at this point.
That is correct.
I see. The next question is the payroll support for the loan supposed to be calendar year or for the 12 months preceding the loan?
I would do the full calendar year as well as the first quarter of the 2020 calendar year. And this is me assuming what the lenders will be asking for. But it's better to have more information than less information, since the lenders are the ones that are going to be asking for the required documents in the processing of the application.
Let's see. Now, thank you. To cap the 100, to cap the 100,000? Is it only salary, wages, then you add benefits on top, or is it $100,000 for everything?
Salaries and wages, compensation on top.
Okay, so top compensation. Okay, benefits will be on top. All right. And now on the PPP loan, 75% has to go to payroll and 25% can go to rent and mortgage. Is that correct?
Can you repeat it again? I'm sorry.
So on the PPP loan, 75% has to go to payroll and 25% can go to rent and mortgage. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then we have another one that says, do we wait until April 10th to apply if we are a sole proprietor?
If you are sole proprietor, give me a moment. So starting tomorrow, April 3rd, small businesses and sole proprietors can apply for and receive loans. Starting April 10th, independent contractors and self-employed individuals can apply for and receive loans to cover the payroll and certain expenses.
And that includes self-compensation based on what they were making in the past.
Correct.
Wonderful. And then there's a link right here for the Paycheck Protection Fine. Wonderful, thank you. And I'll include it in our resources as well. And we have a question from Lorraine as well. This includes P&L for the first 3 months of 2020 in addition to 2019. Does that include the 3 months?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So you would. The question from the lenders is going to be, do you have your payroll or not your payroll, your income taxes filed for 2019? A lot of us, individuals and businesses, have not filed them, and then it was extended as far as the deadline is concerned.
Right.
So they're going to require a profit and loss statement for the full 2019, and then a profit and loss for January through current, or the first quarter, if you will, since we're already in April, for 2020. If you filed your taxes, they're going to require your tax returns, as well as profit and loss statement for the first quarter of 2020. So again, taking as much information to the lender will definitely give you that upper hand as to the requirements that they're going to be looking for.
I see. And does small business include an S corp?
Yes.
So as long as there's 500 employees or less.
Employees or less, correct.
Wonderful. My IF Stay Connected is misspelled. Money is fungible, so as long as there's a payroll amount equal to 75% of the loan, is that okay?
Can you repeat that? You say money is?
I think there, let me go back, and I lost the chat. Manny, can you jump in for a second? No. Just give me 1 sec. Okay, there you go. So it says money is fungible so long as there is a payroll amount equal to 70. So fundable, I guess. So as long as there's a payroll amount of 75% of the loan, is that okay?
No. So the question is going to be that if you have employees, or you have employees that were sent home, as Brenda covered earlier, the wages and the compensation must remain the same. So 75% of the total loan amount has to be used in that manner. 25% of the loan amount can be used for rent, mortgages, and everything else, as previously mentioned.
Okay. Now, would it be possible to get 2 different loans, or is it just a one loan application? Because I could just get a loan for that much payroll and my rent, and then another loan for other purposes, and not use that for the forgiveness program.
Yeah, you can apply for both the economic injury disaster loan and the payroll protection program. The economic injury disaster loan will cover the other items, not including the payroll, which you can use those 2 loans for.
Wonderful. So that would be a good strategy to get this done. Now, one other thing is, do you include state costs when calculating the wages, or is it just federal? And I'm assuming that they're referring to the fringe benefits, including state costs, state taxes, etc. So are we including any types of benefits or taxes that we pay to the state?
Great question. The recommendation is to visit the lender when you're going to go visit them tomorrow. If you're ready to go, they will tell you what information they're going to need in order for them to continue to process that loan, and that includes those taxes that are being asked.
Okay. Now, and in terms of the 75% rule for payroll, does that mean that employees have to keep working, or is it okay if we pay the employees and even if they don't work? Do we have to keep them not just on payroll, but physically working or working from home?
Great question. And that's something that's not covered in detail as far as the PPP is concerned. What it does say is that you have to continue to have your employees at the same level of compensation and salary on payroll. Whether the business is shut down because of the stay-in-place orders that are in, right now, and they're working from home, or they're not working but they're still on payroll, that is something that I would ask your employer or your lender when you submit the application as well.
Great. Thank you.
So Victor, this is Eric. Just to clarify, the individuals to receive the payroll program, they have to be at the same level of employment that they were before the COVID-19 situation. What if their hours were changed in response to it?
Yeah, so again, what it's saying is the compensation to that employee must not change, and you must keep them at the same levels prior to the COVID-19 situation. And so what they're trying to avoid is, if I recall an employee whom I was formerly paying $22 an hour and 50 cents, bringing them back and saying, hey, I can bring you back, but I could only bring you back at 18. Now that, one, is not fair, it's not ethical, and it's not right for the employee as well as the employer. So what the intent of this program is to assist the employer to maintain and retain those employees at the same levels prior to the COVID-19.
Wonderful. And I know that there may be other questions, and I know that we originally scheduled this webinar to last an hour and 30 minutes. It is likely that we'll go all the way to 2 hours with the presentation from the Department of Employment Development. So do we have...
This is Eric. I don't believe we have a participant from the EDD on the call. Do we have Kelly? Yeah, I don't think Kelly was able to make it today. So what we'll do, because I do want to be mindful to everybody's time, is I'm going to resend that link that I initially sent to the EDD's website for the work sharing program. And just very briefly, the work sharing program allows for payment of unemployment insurance benefits to individuals whose hours have been reduced with the employer. And just really briefly, some of the requirements just to be aware of, it has to be for a minimum of 2 employees who have been affected by a reduction in wages or hours worked. And those employees must make up at least 10% of the employer's regular workforce. The reduction needs to be between 10 to 60% of the weekly wages of the individual. And the company must maintain employees' health and retirement benefits that were under the same terms as prior to the reduction, or they must be equal to the other employees that are currently employed with the business but are not participating in the program. Again, if you are interested in learning more about this, you can visit the website I just sent. You can also call the EDD's website at, the EDD's employer hotline for the program. And I'm going to type this in at 916-464-3343. One thing I want to note on this program as well is I believe it is still, applications are still being accepted only by mail. And I believe that information is on the website as well. So just be aware of that.
Wonderful. There are a series of other questions, including, can the average pay to a service employee be padded within total loan to make up the difference for average customer tips?
Yes, I replied to Dan.
Yes.
The answer is no. It only includes salaries and hourly rates. Commissions
So
and bonuses and tips are not included in the amount.
okay. Now, what if you don't use the entire amount approved, but use only 75% of what you do use on payroll? Can you return the balance of that loan and have the remainder forgiven? So, so what if you borrow a little more than what you anticipated and then decide to return the remainder of the loan to match that 75% formula on payroll?
That would be a question for the lender, since the lender would be processing the application for that business. That would be a question for them.
And do we have a list of approved lenders who can submit the PPP application?
Yes, I put the link to the find your local lender, if you will, on the chat. And I'll put it up there again.
Let me post it again. Wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead and unmute everybody at this time, or just to make sure that no other question is being forgotten. Let's see if this works with everybody's unmute button on. Let's see. Hello, everybody.
Hello. Hello.
Unemployment claims, please dial 1-800-300-5616.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
Monday through Friday from 8 to 12 p.m. You can also visit the EDD's main website at edd.ca.
Hello.
If this is in regards to Workforce Connection.
Hello? Can you please say your name? Well, it looks like I don't have any other questions. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this webinar. As I mentioned before, I will be providing both presentations via email to everybody. We'll post it as well, and we'll make sure that we give you information on where to get this from other sources. Eric, do you want to add anything else at this point?
I just wanted to remind everybody, if there is a need for assistance for layoffs, the Workforce Board can provide services for you on that with our rapid response program. My colleague Martha Espinosa did send that information on that. I'm going to resend that again. You can contact Martha at 559-490-7147. And again, you can visit our website for up-to-date information on our services in regards to layoff assistance at www.fresnobsc.com. I also want to note as well that we are hosting a series of rapid response orientation webinars. We will continue doing this into next week. We'll have an official marketing piece for that tomorrow. I believe we're looking at Tuesday and Thursday. These are sessions that employees who have been laid off can access. They do not need to register. They can just access the Zoom link and jump on the moment that we're starting the presentations. We provide an overview of Workforce Development Board services, as well as representatives from the EDD to talk about unemployment insurance, Department of Social Services to go over CalFresh and Medicare services, as well as some other partners that provide low-cost services for individuals impacted by layoffs. You can visit our website once again. I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but www.fresnobsc.com. We post our webinars on a daily basis. We'll have our new webinars for next week on there by tomorrow, which will have the Zoom links on there for you to access.
Just to piggyback on that, Eric, we are also providing free resume workshops, and we have partnered with the State Center Community College, the Training Institute. We are going to be paying for them to offer these free classes for folks, so people can sign up for that as well. Fernando, you are on mute, so I don't think anyone can hear you right now.
Thank you. I just wanted to, and that happens to me all the time. So I got rid of the background so it wouldn't be as distracting. Thank you so much for everybody that made this possible. I also want to specifically thank the Chamber, the Tulare Chamber of Commerce, the Visalia Chamber of Commerce, and Fresno Chamber of Commerce, who were able to spread the word around. and of course, our partners at the Fresno Regional Workforce Development Board, and all the panelists today. Thank you so much, Brenda Butke and Victor Briviesca, for giving us this information. Please stay tuned. We'll keep sending information via email, and please stay safe, healthy, and continue to be bold, guys. We'll get through this. Thank you so much.